as you honor the centenary of Can Themba, a literary giant whose legacy resonates and inspires even a century later. The film, titled Can Themba, The Teacher in the Newsroom, is a crafted documentary which delves into his life, writing, teaching and struggles through the eyes and words of those who knew him personally. The documentary paints a portrait of a man whose life and work had a profound impact on South Africa's history and culture, inspiring countless people with his words and his life story. To tell us more, we joined virtually by Can Themba's biographer, Dr Siphiwo Mahala. A very good morning to Dr. Mahala. Thanks for joining us. Welcome.
Morning, Sphere. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure, Dr. Mahala. You know, when one speaks and reads about Can Themba, where does one even start? I mean, from someone who has been part of a cabal of writers who revolutionized journalism in the early 60s and who was very instrumental in the abolishment of apartheid. But let's now just share some insights into Can Themba's personal life and how it influenced his writing.
Yeah, well, what we have to do really is to look back 100 years to say this man died at a young age of 43 in 1967, obviously born on 21 June 1924, meaning yesterday was his centenary, so we celebrated the birthday. So in doing so, we had to take a retrospective look at his legacy, and yeah, the focus really was teaching, particularly because, you know, we celebrated Can Themba as a short story writer. We celebrated Can Themba as a journalist. And, you know, it was quite significant that yesterday we celebrated his centenary, focusing on his legacy as a teacher, particularly because he studied at Rhodes University here in Makhanda. So it was quite significant that we held the celebration here. At the same time, when you look at him as a teacher, his teaching was not confined to the classroom. We know that he taught people like Casey Mutsisi, for instance, who became a legendary journalist in his own right, because he took Casey Mutsisi after having taught him at high school, at Matibani High School. He recruited him to Drum magazine as his associate editor. And then we've seen him, for instance, he established his house as the House of Truth, where, you know, he encouraged intellectual debate and candid engagement amongst young people. So his preoccupation throughout his life was about nurturing young minds.
And how did his experiences as a teacher and a journalist shape his worldview and his literary style? I quite like what you said, that his teaching was not only confined in the classroom.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at, for instance, that he won the Drum Short Story Prize in 1953, and then he was recruited from teaching into journalism. So one would think that that is the end for him, but he continued being a teacher even in the newsroom. In fact, the phrase, the teacher in the newsroom, is taken from a phrase by Ndadete Utlolwe, whom we know is a journalism icon in his own right. So Ndadete Utlolwe, in 1960, got his first opportunity to publish in a newspaper through Can Themba, because he says he had been trying for so many times to get published. And then it was Can Themba who did not just reject his piece, but took it and looked at it and told him, please change this, please change that. And that way, George Lolwe was introduced to journalism. The same applies to Mayet, for instance. He was mentored by Can Themba in the newsroom. So we're looking at someone here who, whilst being a journalist, continued being a teacher. And apart from that, he visited institutions like Wits University, University of Pretoria, where he gave guest lectures, and also high schools. He went to give guest classes in schools like Orlando High, for instance, where someone like Professor Ngondo had the opportunity to be taught by Can Themba.
You know, I was quite intrigued by one of his writings that he documented called Brothers in Christ, where, he sought to interrogate if white churches would welcome black worshippers as part of the Christian doctrine of brotherhood. Let's now talk about some of the key themes that he explored in his writing and just how they resonated with the South African context of his time.
Yeah, actually, that story in particular, Brothers in Christ, is a story that two of our interviewees talk about.
Yeah.
Jürgen Skadebeck, the drum photographer, as well as the late Peter Makubane. Because what the drum did is since Henry Numalo started the drum exposés, they were very daring journalists who really got themselves in the line of trouble. If you remember Henry Numalo's better story, that he got himself arrested and worked on the farms where there was a huge risk of being killed, and he worked under slavery conditions while investigating this story. So from that point, Drum Magazine decided to have a team for each year for the Drum Exposé, Mr. Drum Exposé. And the church story was one of those where black people, Can Themba as a black journalist, would deliberately go to the secluded, exclusive white churches to check if he'll be chased away,
Yeah.
And he got into trouble for that. He got beaten up, he got bruised, and Jürgen Skadebeck and Peter Makubane captured the story. And to him, at one point he was charged for trespassing, going to church. And his claim was that an African wanted to go to church, and he's being arrested for that.
And it was always the subject of police interrogation because he always dared to cross the line. And I'm quite curious to know what is it about his legacy that continues to inspire and resonate with people today?
Yeah, I think most importantly for me is his search for knowledge. As a journalist, he was prepared to go to any corner of the country to find a story, and he went to very remote areas in Mpumalanga, Northwest, even Lesotho and Botswana. And what fascinates me about him is that he looked at the marginalized. He always went for the underdog and elevated their story. There's the story, for instance, of Alcott Kwenche, who was banished to French days. And, the purpose for that, he was a struggle icon in the Eastern Cape. And first, they took him to Bushbuck Ridge, in an area where they knew that he won't be very influential in terms of language. In that area, they spoke Tsonga mainly. But Kwenche used music to mobilize people, used soccer to mobilize people. And then he was taken from there when he became too influential and taken to French Dade in the Northwest. Can Themba went to French Dade to interview Kwenche. So he had a knack for those stories that didn't seem like they could make headlines. And a story like this one, for instance, he sensationalized it and said South Africa has a concentration camp. And this was shortly after the Second World War, and people had a very clear memory of what happened in Nazi Germany. So journalists from all over the world came to investigate what is happening in South Africa, that there is a concentration camp.
I mean, Dr. Mahala, just taking into cognizance the fact that he was then banned under the Suppression of Communism Amendment Act, and his writing could neither be published nor referenced until 15 years after his death. And how did the political climate during that time, during his lifetime, particularly apartheid, impact his life and his writing?
Well, it's important to understand that Can Themba, when he died, he was banned in South Africa, and he was living in Swaziland. So being banned, as you say, he could not even be cited in the country. So that is why it's important to celebrate his legacy. In many ways, we are reclaiming his legacy. We are restoring his dignity, because by the time he died, he was homeless. And it is quite significant that he's been revived through his work. Yesterday, I watched The Suit, for instance, which is one of his short stories, which was performed in this very same festival in 1994. So while celebrating Can Themba's 100th birthday centenary, the festival itself celebrating 50 years of existence, we were also celebrating 30 years of The Suit at the National Arts Festival. So it is through his work that Can Themba has been revived. Can Themba's legacy continues.
Dr. Mahala, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot.
That was Can Themba's biographer, Dr. Siphiwo Mahala, talking to us about a crafted documentary, Can Themba, the teacher in the newsroom, which delves into his life, his writing, his teachings and struggles through the eyes and words of those who knew him personally.